Welcome to Inside the Arena, your source for everything off the ice, off the court, and outside the field of play. With your hosts, KOMO Sports Director Niko Tamurian and KOMO Senior Reporter Chris Daniels.
Well, here we are, Niko. It's our first remote version of Inside the Arena. We're branching out. We're not in the same room for the first time here in 4 months.
Chris, I miss you already. Well, you're doing something. I'm just in my, like, full disclosure, like, I'm just in my bedroom right now in the corner of it. You're actually doing, like, important work for our state right now.
Yes, coming to you as live, so to speak, from Spokane right now. It's been a wacky couple of weeks, as you know, in New York, in Spokane, with the Pac-12. I think when we recorded last week, we were talking about what will happen with the Apple Cup, and then Washington State and Oregon State dropped this bomb in the middle of it all with realignment, which we're going to talk about in this episode of Inside the Arena. Episode number 16, we're sitting down talking with Kirk Schulz, the Washington State University president. That's going to be an extended version of what you heard on KOMO as all of this was breaking last week with the Pac-12 and realignment. The addition to the Pac-12, as you know, Niko, of Colorado State, Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State. You're going to hear what Kirk Schulz has to say, the WSU president, about how all of that went down in just a minute. But first, what we like to do, Niko, every week, 4 corners, the top 4 things, what's good and bad in the world of sports. And we're actually doing this from corners of the state right now. How about that? How about that? That's meta right now, what we're talking about here with what's going on in the world of sports, off the field, off the ice, off the court. What do you like, Niko, this week?
Well, if we really want to touch all 4 corners, we get producer Bill to go to, like, Pullman, Yakima, maybe Longview or something, right?
Send him to Walla Walla.
I'm Bill, you know, you're popular there, buddy, and maybe we'll get you a free soda and burger or something. But no, what I like in these 4 corners is I'm going to start with the Apple Cup, and certainly we have a lot more to discuss in the world of college sports in our state. But what I liked about it, and Chris, we talked about this at length, is the notion, the idea that it was going to be a different Apple Cup, and maybe even to a certain extent lamenting that it was going to be different, even if we were gracious to Chuck Arnold and the Seahawks for stepping up the way that they did to make sure that there was no break in this rivalry. And so I'm calling this a positive because I was one of those folks that was saying, okay, glad the game's being played, just kind of wish it was either on campus at Husky Stadium or at Martin Stadium. Yet here we are, a late ticket push. We were hearing something in the 30s were sold on Friday, and the final attendance was just over 57,000. I was on the field. Chris, I'm going to tell you that last drive, which I'm sure you as a Coug were enjoying, the noise, the juice, the energy was electric. It felt very similar to as if it was maybe not the end of a Seahawks game per se, but you still felt that energy, you still felt that emotion. It was not affected in any way, shape, or form by being in an NFL stadium. So I want to give credit to all the powers that be to make that happen, to the fans that showed up. You know, there was one hiccup. I know of some Cougs fans that when they went on secondary sites like StubHub, the way the map was laid out, it looked like they were buying seats in the Cougar section. They actually ended up in the Husky section. So that would be a negative on a minor fashion. That happened to a couple folks I know. But all in all, the atmosphere was electric. The only reason you don't like this game is if you were a Husky lamenting the outcome. But kudos to everybody involved, the fans, administrators, whatever, because, man, that atmosphere was rocking. And a lot of emotion behind it. And for being in a pro stadium, that was really cool.
Well, and I would tell you, Niko, as we chronicled last week on KOMO News, there was not a lot of buzz about this game. We talked about it on Inside the Arena as well. The fact that ticket sales were lagging, that they were super expensive. There wasn't a lot of talk going into Apple Cup week like there normally was in a November. This was the first ever September Apple Cup. It's been played in October before, but never in September at a neutral site. And there just wasn't a lot of buzz in this. There was a lot of negative energy, so to speak, by both Cougs and Huskies having to play this game there. And yeah, there was a tremendous walk-up for this event. And I think that speaks to the importance of the Apple Cup and keeping it going long-term in Washington State. upwards of 19,000 tickets. I was down there, and you could walk up to the front office and the ticket office and get a ticket for $75. It was less than that on the secondary market. So a lot of Coug fans showed up at the last minute, I believe, when you saw this firsthand, how the stands filled up. But yeah, I think the outcome was it was the first time I've heard Husky friends tell me that if there was ever an Apple Cup they were going to lose, it was going to be this one, because they were also unhappy with realignment and unhappy with that game in September and unhappy with it there. And hey, you and I have talked about this. The closest thing to an expansion franchise in college football right now is the Huskies, with a brand new coaching staff and all the brand new players. So if this was one Apple Cup the Huskies were going to lose, they certainly didn't want to lose it last year when they almost did, by the way. Yeah. Hey, talking about the positive, I am really interested in what the Kraken are going to do this year as training camp opens this week. It is a brand new world for the Seattle Kraken. In some respects, similar to the Huskies, right? With brand new coaching staff, with new free agent signings, and this whole new weird TV world as they rolled out this week, the Kraken Hockey Network, all sorts of new radio stations in 4 states. They're going over the air. They're going with Amazon. They've hired a few new people, like our good buddy Ian Furness, who's going to be the pre and post game show host. It's been a long haul for him. I think it's great for him to get that stage, and it's going to be interesting just to see how all of this works. Essentially, a new model for distributing the product. We will see how many people can find that product through Amazon Prime and through over the air and through all those new radio stations. So I think that's going to be something fun to watch. What don't you like, Niko? You're a positive guy, but what don't you like?
This show is so easy because it's so much fun talking with you. But as you mentioned, I'm a positive guy, so sometimes it's difficult to find negative things. And I know we like to go behind the story, but you know what, Chris? Gosh darn it. I'm going to do a little bit of X's and O's, literally X's and O's in this.
Okay.
What on earth was that play call from the Huskies on 4th and 1? But we can't avoid the topic, Chris. I know we like to go behind the scenes, and you obviously do a masterful job of that, like we had last week's show with the NBA. But I was sitting right in that end zone, and I'm sitting here, and I'm like, the way the Huskies were lined up, I'm like, they look like they're doing a new option play. No, they can't do that on 4th and 1. If you're going to run it on 4th and 1, you give it to this bowling ball of a running back whose arms are the size of tree trunks, Joe Niko, who's fantastic. Just give it to him up the middle. And they have Will Rogers in. He's not your option quarterback. Great quarterback, but not your option quarterback. Jed Fish lost his first Apple Cup on one play call. One play call. And yeah, there was issue, like, the end of the first half. They did their mistake, and Mateer was masterful and made him pay and all that stuff. But when you have that one situation and a rivalry that means so much to those fans especially, I mean, yes, you mentioned if Husky fans are saying, okay, if there's one to lose, it was this one. And I understand that. But, it's what are you doing with that play call? In that situation, again, I know we like to avoid the X's and O's, but I think it's one X and O play call that has just really bled its way into every fan's mindset, football expert or not.
Well, if there's a positive out of that negative, maybe no Husky fans really saw it because it was on Peacock. That's the irony. The irony of this whole thing was the Pac-12 split up because of having more access to linear television and these games being seen and more visible by more fans. And the first 2 games of the Husky season were blacked out on Comcast, and the third game on Peacock. We'll see just how many people can watch Northwestern and the Huskies this week, but. I think it's there's some delicious context to this whole thing, that the idea that the Pac-12 broke up and nobody's been able to watch the aftermath.
Can I give you a little anecdote to this? Oh, go ahead. I want to give you a little anecdote to this game. I know you know this, but I think this sentiment resonates across the country, and it's hit home for me because my brother flew all the way in from upstate New York for one reason. He says it was to see me, my son, and my wife, but he packed only Coug shirts for a reason, and it's because he's a huge college football fan, and him and his buddy hate the way this is shaken out for WSU and Oregon State, and they said, you know what, we're going to this Apple Cup, and we have nothing against the Huskies per se, like they're ACC fans, but they wanted to show support for the Cougs for everything that they've been. And I suspect that's something that a lot of college sports fans are feeling across the country. And so my brother likes to say the Cougs are 1-0 with him in attendance. I'm neutral in this whole thing. I didn't go to either school. I have good relationships with folks at both schools. So I just wanted a good game, which is what we got. But I just thought that was a cool little thing to throw out there. And they met some other folks that were doing that as well. So, yeah, Chris, if you want your Cougs to keep winning, you got to find my brother some tickets in the future.
Well, hey, if the Cougs keep winning, they're going to be an easier sell to TV networks in this whole realignment thing. And that's actually folds into my negative this week as we bring it around on Four Corners. As we're recording this, we're recording it before another meeting amongst these new Pac-12 schools on who they may want to extend invitations to. There's been some discussion. John Canzano, who's been an excellent writer and reporter out of Oregon for years, he's suggesting the Pac-12 in his reporting is meeting to discuss adding Tulane and Memphis. I don't love that if I'm a Coug. I don't love that if I'm a fan of what used to be the Pac-12. And frankly, these four schools that have been added, I don't necessarily love it. It's Washington State and Oregon State in a way, waving the white flag to join the Big 12 or wait for the ACC. The timing may not have been there to wait for the ACC to fall apart. So they took what appears to be the best deal. They took what appears to be the name brand schools. I know we hate to talk about brands in college football, but Boise State is one of them. San Diego State is in a brand new school in warm weather in Southern California. That's how this process works. You want eyeballs, you go for the brand that people know on a national level, and you go for one of the biggest markets down in San Diego and really Southern California with LA. But I don't know if I love it yet. We're going to have to see how the Pac-12, what they do next, who they potentially add. Is there a way for Gonzaga to enter the mix? Because if Gonzaga was added to a Pac-12, even as a basketball-only member or non-football member, I should say, that is a big sell for going to TV networks and getting that next package.
Yeah. I would just add a couple things. Oh, go ahead. I would just say I'll add a couple things here. I know there's exit fees involved here. I would love to see UNLV added, not just because they're having a good football season this year, but because you're talking about the Vegas market, if you're talking about eyeballs and whatnot. Secondly, I would say while on the surface it may be waving the white flag, I really genuinely think that one of those two leagues, the Big 12 or ACC, will come calling, and I do think the Cougs and the Beavers get the call and one day say, hey, it was nice knowing you to the Pac-12, as much as I hate to say that part of it, but I don't think that's off the table just yet. Even if the ACC just came out and it looks like they're patching things up with Florida State and Clemson, I do think there's going to be some kind of partnership. Stanford and Cal can't be out on an island until 2036 when the ACC grant of rights runs out. Some people suspected they might be a good Pac-12 fit, obviously, but because of that grant of rights that league has, it becomes a big legal battle. I don't think the door is completely shut on the Cougs and Beavers. We know that the Big 12 has coveted Gonzaga for their basketball value, and if you do that, suddenly the Cougs become of enormous value. Travel partner, new time zone for football, all that good stuff. So I'm not ready. Maybe it's just wishful thinking, but I'm not ready to punt on that part of it just yet.
No pun intended on the punt part.
No, but, I mean, really, I just kind of said it. You noticed the pun, though.
Hey, we're going to continue to kick that ball down the field in just a minute. See what I did there with Kirk Schulz, the Washington State University president. You'll hear how he says that deal came together. Quickly, though, our Supersonic Minute, we do this every week. We talked about it longer than a minute last week after I came back from New York and what's going on with expansion. There has been a lot written on a national stage since that press conference back in New York. And I encourage you to go back and listen to and watch last week's episode for more on this. You heard what Adam Silver had to say, that the league is expected to address expansion this season. I would like to report ESPN.com in a lengthy Q&A on expansion put this out there. It's been a known secret in Seattle at this point, but Rick Welts, who is the former Sonics ball boy, and it has gone on to great things since, UW grad, executive vice president of the NBA, credited with creating All-Star Weekend and the marketing arm of the NBA, was the Golden State Warriors president. Heck, the guy has been profiled on 60 Minutes. He's that big of a deal. Yeah. He's been hired as an advisor by the Seattle group that is primarily the part of the Kraken ownership that's interested in bringing the Sonics home. People have known that in Seattle now for more than a year. He's been quietly at the exhibition games at Climate Pledge Arena, surveying things. He's that kind of guy. He's not a guy who's going to be out there doing a ton of interviews. But he knows the NBA, and he has been advising the Seattle group now for quite some time. ESPN.com officially that reporting it, putting it out into the ecosystem. So there you have it. That is something that's been happening behind the scenes quietly over the last year as we talk about expansion. Niko, should we go back to realignment in the Pac-12? How the heck this all happened?
I think so, because you know what, Chris, as you know, I think there's going to be about a 2-month stretch coming up pretty soon. We're talking a lot of Sonics. So yep. I think let's dive into the conference stuff. Why not?
Okay, Kirk Schulz, the Washington State University president. I teased it. I talked to him at length the day this all went down on KOMO News. But here is an extended conversation with President Schulz about why Washington State and Oregon State have added these 4 new schools to the Pac-12.
This all come together, this announcement today?
Well, Chris, over the last 3 months or 4 months, we, Oregon State, Washington State, worked with a firm called Navigate to help us map out some potential pathways for the 2 schools, which included, reverse merger, it included joining another conference, it included growing the Pac-12 or rebuilding the Pac-12. And as we went through the summer, looked at options, had conversations, it became really clear that our preference was to rebuild the Pac-12. So this has been a 3 or 4 month project, and it just accelerated a lot in the last 2 weeks with the 4 schools that we added this morning.
Did you only make the offer to those 4 schools?
That's correct. We only made an offer to those 4 schools and had been in discussions with them for a couple weeks, and then things really ramped up, I would say, this last weekend. And those schools actually said, we're interested, we want to come, but we also want to do this quickly. And we thought, well, that must mean they want to get it done by the end of the month. And they said, no, this was last weekend. They said, no, we'd like to do it by Friday. So the 4 entering schools really wanted to push the pace, and we were happy to do that.
Why just those 4 schools? Why not other schools in the Mountain West?
Well, we felt those 4 represented the best opportunity to continue to build brands in the marketplace. Those 4 schools had been incredibly aspirational with their athletic programs and wanted to continue to grow and invest. And we just felt like they were the absolute best fit with us. And they were very interested in thinking bigger, broader, and on a national landscape. So those represented, we thought, the 4 schools that certainly at the present time represented where we wanted to go as a conference.
A lot of people have been writing today about the financial picture of it all, right? That they're going to have to pay buyout fees. There's a question of how much cuts into the war chests that Washington State and Oregon State have accumulated with the legal issues. So with them coming in with the money that you already have on hand as a result of all this realignment, how does this make financial sense for Washington State and Oregon State?
Well, when we looked at the addition of those 4 schools to 6 and talked to our potential media partners, they estimated that we would double the amount of money that we could get in the marketplace on media rights by adding those 4 schools over not having them there. So it was clear to us that if we're going to maximize our opportunity in the marketplace now, we've got to add the brands that make the most sense. So that really was part of the driving force is, let's build a premier West Coast conference. I've read some comments today and people say, well, this isn't really the Pac-12. No, it's going to be a different Pac-12 moving forward. But I still believe we're going to position ourselves as the premier Division I athletics conference west of the Rocky Mountains. And I think that's an important niche that we used to have. And then all of a sudden when schools left, we don't have anymore. And our goal is to reestablish that as a national brand.
You just said west of the Rocky Mountains, and that leads to another question because immediately people are pointing out accurately that you need to get to 8 schools by 2026 at least in the Pac-12 to get back in the big conversation about the football playoff and all of that. So west of the Rocky Mountains, what do you do from here to try and get to that 8 threshold or above?
So one of the pitches we made to the 4 new members of the Pac-12 conference was, one of the opportunities is to help us together figure out who we want to add as we look to add future members, over the next few months. And we want to have conversations about, do you consider members from a national viewpoint? That's what some of the power conferences have done, right, is they've got members from coast to coast. Do you want to have a footprint that's in the western part of the United States where travel costs may be mitigated and it's easier for families and student athletes maybe to move around in terms of their impact on their studies and other parts? And I'm not trying to bias one of those or the other, but that's a discussion the 6 of us are going to have, and we'll start it probably next week on what does that need to look like. So we know there's some urgency, but I think we want to make sure that we sort of figure out and say, what is our goal here, and make sure that we don't do something fast, that in a couple of weeks everybody would say, well, you had some time, why didn't you use it? So we're going to be careful, we're going to be deliberative, we're going to work together with our new members and decide on what those next steps look like. And I would say, we know we need to get to 8, but there's no reason that you couldn't grow 10 or some other particular number. So I don't want everybody thinking, well, you just got to add 2. Certainly we have to add 2 to get the NCAA minimum, but this may be a time to also look at, other strategic schools that fit where we want to go as we expand our membership.
Schools that do not play football, or is that an option at all?
We certainly have talked about that, and again, with our new members, that's going to be one of the conversations that we're going to need to have is how do you look at what a member needs to be, and do they have to have football? I think for sure you've got to get to 8 football playing schools, and so I think once you get to 8 and you think you've got that, you can certainly look at some other options beyond that. That could be other preeminent universities that make a lot of sense to be in the new Pac-12.
Is there any snowball's chance in heck that Stanford and Cal could be invited back or somehow come back into the Pac-12 conference from where you sit?
That's probably been the top question I've gotten today is around Stanford and Cal. And to me, I've got no control over what Stanford and Cal will decide to do in the long run. What we can do is build the absolute best conference that we can. And then at some point when there's going to be further realignment or schools moving around, we'd like to be seen as a great destination on the West Coast. And I think the best that we can do, if anybody's going to be moving around in a few more years, is create a conference with a clear set of values that's athletically successful and academically similar, and we'll see what happens down the road.
And going back to the question of timing with these 4 schools saying they wanted to get this done by Friday, help me out with the calendar here. Does that impact the fee that they would have to pay the Mountain West, or does that impact the finances at all? Is that a reason why they wanted to get this done by Friday?
No, it has no impact whatsoever on any part of that. There was not a calendar deadline. I think, today, as you well know, we thought it was amazing that no word on this leaked out anywhere until about 8:30 last night before a 6 a.m. announcement this morning. So I think part of it was a realization that if we took too long on our conversations, it kind of dribbles out, and you don't have an opportunity maybe to shape the narrative the way that we feel that we were able to do. And so I think that drove more of it than anything else. And I think once you start having those conversations, it can become awkward in your current conference home when everybody knows you're having those discussions. And I think those 4 schools wanted to, prior to the football games this weekend and all the weekend festivities, if they're going to go, they wanted to go ahead and get it done. So, and obviously we were in alignment with that as well.
So this all goes into effect in 2026, correct?
It does.
So what happens in 2025? That was, the story, as you know, that came out a couple of weeks ago about the scheduling agreement going away in 2025 is all kind of in the middle of this conversation. I think people can now draw their own conclusions about why that announcement was made about 2025. So before these schools officially join in 2026, what do you do in 25?
Well, it turns out for all of our sports, they will continue in whatever their current home is for the next 2 years. So our partnership with the West Coast Conference, and for basketball and those other sports, that's just going to be the same way it is. For football, when we weren't able to reach agreement with the Mountain West on the dollars needed to have another 2025 fall football schedule partnership, we actually have an alternative schedule that we had worked out, and we expect to be able to announce that relatively soon. So I think we feel really good about what that's going to look like for the next 2 years. And we'll just we'll see how it settles as we spend some time figuring out future schedules with a new conference footprint. And that's part of the reason there's probably some urgency to get above 8 as soon as practically possible, just so those teams can start working on that. Just like our friends in the Big Ten, and some of those had to do with USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon. It takes some time to do that. It's not quite as quick as everybody thinks.
Right. In the TV business, we call that a tease. You said an alternative schedule you'll be willing to announce. You don't want to do that today.
Right. If I had it in front of me and I knew that Ann McCoy, our athletic director, would beat me with a stick, happy to do that. But I need to let that come out of athletics when that's all done. But I would anticipate, in the next couple of weeks, that'll be out there for our fans to see. And I think people are going to see some cool games on there. It's going to be an exciting schedule for our fans and our student athletes.
Big 12 ACC partnership potentially on that?
We're certainly having those discussions. And if I think I'm working a lot of hours, I can tell you Commissioner Teresa Gould, she is just doing so much. And I know she's already in conversations with other conferences about what those kind of matchups could be, or partnerships, or scheduling. I hate to use the term scheduling alliance because people read more into that than I mean, but it's not uncommon to sort of say, hey, let's work together over several years to schedule games back and forth, and I think we certainly want to do that.
All right, let's end with this. Obviously, big news today. It's been big news really for the last year or two on realignment. When do you think this ends?
Well, I think that we'll be stable for 4 or 5 more years. But then I think what's going to happen is you have all these, media contracts come back up and get negotiated. There's going to be some more shuffling around. The SEC and the Big Ten, because of the financial advantages that they have, that's still going to be perceived nationally like the golden ticket, and they're going to be able to get their pick of whomever they want moving forward if they choose to expand. So I think for the next 5 years or so, it's probably going to be pretty stable. But then I would expect some shuffling around again when those contracts expire and people are out negotiating media rights and people are trying to maximize their income, and the schools they have in the conference are going to have a lot to say about that.
Okay, one more question that just came to my mind before I let you go. The war chest that has been reported up to $250 million that Oregon State and Washington State have, will there be any money used from that to help pay the exit fees for these 4 schools?
We're still working on what that's going to look like, Chris, so I'm not really able to give too much in the way of details right now.
All right, so there you have it, Niko. Just again, for the record, that was recorded on Thursday the 12th when all of this broke, and you heard the today references, so you have that as a frame of mind. As we're recording this, there's a question of further meetings this week about Memphis and Tulane. There's been a lot written about whether Gonzaga could get involved. As you mentioned, Niko, UNLV seems to make a lot of sense, but there is reporting out of Nevada that it may be tough to break up Nevada Reno, as it used to be called, the University of Nevada, and the University of Nevada Las Vegas, because they share the same board of regents. So all of this is fast developing, it appears. really what happened up until last week was 2 weeks in the making, even though the conversations went back several months before that. It really advanced in a hurry after the Mountain West scheduling agreement fell apart, and then they've got that deal. Now it's a question of what the second phase is, and I think the story will continue to get written. And as I told you in the Four Corners, I think we need to see how that works out before we can really pass full judgment on what the heck is going on in the Pac-12.
That word expansion is going to be a big thing, whether it's here or the NBA over the next few months, no question.
And we will continue to expand the conversation here on Inside the Arena.
You was on your game today, man.
Our first remote edition. We've done it, Niko.
We
4
have
months now of this. Week 16. Over the last 15 weeks, it's been great. We've had people like Kenny Mayne, the Hall of Famer Lenny Wilkins. We've had the athletic directors from Washington State and the University of Washington. Last week, UW great Damon Heward, who was planning on raising a glass of his wine to a Husky win. That didn't happen. We've had the Fox Sports Network's former president, Bob Thompson, on. We talked about the World Cup, women's sports, off the pitch stuff with the Sounders and the Rain. There's a whole bunch of stuff that people can download. And then next week, we'll be back in the studio together.
I can't wait for that, Chris. What do you say time it is?
It's time for David Lee to take us out.
You've been listening to Inside the Arena with Niko and Chris. Please subscribe on your favorite platform. Until next time.